The Dershow.
What I don't understand, maybe my listeners can explain it to me, is why the administration invoked this alien 1798 French exclusion law that requires that there be either an invasion or a declared war. There hasn't been a declared war, or an invasion by a foreign country. Which one? Venezuela? Venezuela certainly is complicit, but is it invasion? It's a complicated law. And when they invoked the law, they gave this judge, the chief judge of the DC Circuit, the ability to say, wait a minute, you've invoked the law. Let me look at the law. Well, the law says it has to be done pursuant to a foreign country. I don't see that. So I'm going to issue a stay because you came to me with that statute. What if they hadn't come with that statute? What if they had said, look, these guys are gang members. They're murderers. They're rapists. They're bringing in fentanyl. They don't have work papers. They don't have visas. They don't have green cards. They're not citizens. We're just taking them to the border. Would the judge say no? I don't know the answer to that question, but I think it's a question worth asking. And most importantly, I think that the status of all of these bad guys, and look, there's no doubt about it, these are bad guys, and President Trump is on to something when he says the American public do not want them living next door. I don't want them living next door, obviously, and neither do you want them living next door. The question is what can be done. What can be done legally? I think Congress can do more to facilitate the exit of these bad guys, and they should do more. And they can also do more to curtail the jurisdiction of courts. They can pass a statute saying a district court has jurisdiction only to grant an injunction that covers his district or his circuit. Congress can make that definition, but you can't have a judge in New York telling the people of California what to do. And obviously, to use the example that was used by this administration, you can't have a judge in Hawaii telling soldiers in Iraq or in Afghanistan that they can't engage in warfare. When I was a young professor, I think I was already a professor. It was during the Vietnam War. I may have just been an assistant professor. I gave the first course in the history of the country on legal issues growing out of the Vietnam War. I had 1,000 students. It was for not credit. It was just like 10 weeks, and I would conduct the class, and I would most of the time bring in a guest lecturer, an expert in this, an expert in that. And in one of the issues that we raised in the class was whether or not the courts have jurisdiction. Many people thought the war was unconstitutional because it hadn't been declared. And the Constitution says only Congress can declare war. So we had big debates about whether or not people have standing to challenge the war, whether the courts have jurisdiction, whether this is a presidential decision, et cetera, et cetera. These are hard, complicated issues. And President Trump is pressing them hard. And he has the right to do that. That's what checks and balances are about. You have one branch of the government that goes to the limits of its authority and perhaps beyond. Then you have another branch of the government, in this case, two of them, that can say, no, Congress doesn't want you to do that. We're not declaring war, so we're not going to let. Or the courts can say, absent a declaration of war, you can't send troops. The question is, do you have judicial authority to do that? Now, Congress can't limit the power of the United States Supreme Court much. It can do it. It can create what's called, the criteria for writs of certiorari. There's a debate about whether you can have ethical rules for the Supreme Court. Those are interesting constitutional issues. But putting the Supreme Court aside, Congress clearly has the authority. It could abolish the district courts all over the country. It can say we don't have any more district courts. Nothing in the Constitution about district courts. It just says that there can be other lower courts, but it doesn't indicate how many there have to be and where the circuits are and how many Court of Appeals judges per district court judge. Those are all issues for Congress, and Congress can have greater input than they now do. So there is no constitutional crisis, let's be clear. But Congress can help avoid constitutional clashes by legislating on some of these issues. They're not easy. And one party now has control of both houses and the presidency. So if the House introduces legislation curtailing the jurisdiction of district courts. The Senate agrees. The president's going to sign it. That can happen in 2 weeks. Usually things don't happen fast, but something like that can happen in 2 weeks if you have one party in control. Then it gets tested in the courts. And if it's done right, it will survive. It will survive those tests.